When your child or teenager has access to the internet in their bedroom, that is what I call a virtual sleepover, where you don't know who your teenager is talking to. It's really not safe. You need to keep that in mind. It's a virtual sleepover with anyone in the world.
Welcome to The Power of Family, the podcast where we help families talk, listen, and connect across generations. Hi, welcome to The Power of Family. I'm Terry Willis.
And I am Dr. Sonia Toledo. And we have an exciting episode today, Tech versus Talk.
And why did we choose this topic? Because it falls in line with the very theme of what this program is all about. And that is bridging the generational gap between parents and their children and grandparents and their grandchildren. And one of the most divisive elements of today that causes that generational gap is the technology that each and every one of us carry in our hands, in our pockets.
Our conversation is about making connections within families. And for some reason, we are witnessing some disconnection because of this technology piece. We need to really be honest about how this is impacting our relationships.
And adding to that, we need to be able to find solutions and not just talk about the issues. We all can talk the talk. But where do we find solutions to the problems that we know are causing so much division amongst family members?
And, we're talking about an age that technology is taking over fast and it's moving so fast that you feel that you have to catch up. So that gives us more anxiety to be in technology. And our kids, they grew up with technology in their face.
And they are moving quite rapidly with it. And I'm not going to try and state anything short of they are much more advanced than my generation is. Yeah. So but yet as parents, as grandparents, we've got to be able to at least somehow keep up with them or keep track of what they're doing. First off, it is for their safety. It is for their protection. Yes, we know that they need it and they're going to use it, but we are still responsible for their well-being.
And I think it's important for us to start talking about what solutions we have to support our young people and ourselves and how to really deal with technology that is not overwhelming our life, taking over our world.
And hopefully our guest is going to shed light on solutions that we can use in our everyday existence in communicating with our children.
And we are so excited today to have Mary Catherine, who is an expert in technology and connection. And we brought her on because we thought that this would be an amazing topic to talk about how technology is impacting connections with our family. Tell us more about yourself and how did you even start this niche?
Dr. Toledo and Terry, thank you so much for having me on. This is going to be a great joy to have this conversation with you. And so I have been a licensed mental health counselor for 14 years, working with individuals and families with a variety of issues. And I came to a point in my practice where I wanted to work more with families as a whole. Instead of working with one individual and then sometimes bringing the family in, I wanted to start doing more family therapy in my practice. And as I started going down that road, I realized how much fighting over screen time and devices was just a huge part of family issues today. And so I thought, okay, if I can specialize in this niche and really help families even in just this one way, that could really make a big impact on families being able to communicate and have great relationships. And so I became certified and did a lot of my own self-study to figure out, okay, here are the problems that screens are causing, and now here are the solutions to healing the brain, to healing relationships, and helping families. And so I'm excited to be here today to share with you and your audience.
That's awesome. And so where is the research going around technology and the brain? I know that we had this conversation, so I'm really curious about what your thoughts are.
One problem is that we don't have a lot of long-term studies that go over decades to say, okay, these people who are spending a lot of time on screens or these families who are just, spending a lot of time on screens, here's what happens. We don't have the long-term research, but we do have long-term research looking at the mental health status of young people today, and it is just unfortunately going in the tanks. Okay. And I think that's just so sad to see so many mental health issues. And also, we just know just from being alive, I think when we are in our own families and in our neighborhoods and interacting with families, we see how disconnected they are. Everyone is just staring at a screen, in the restaurants, not talking, not interacting, and then just all the families who are trying to do the first good thing by limiting screen time in their homes, and then it just ends up with all of this fighting. And that's just where we're at now. We will eventually have long-term studies, but now I, as a professional, and a few others are trying to sound the alarm to say, hey, we need to get on top of this now. This is a real issue. Screens have addictive properties and needed to be treated as such.
Let's go into the mental health, because that to me is pretty alarming. What do you think? What are the areas that we need to be aware of?
Well, definitely anxiety and depression are on the rise, especially among young people. There has been a tripling of the suicide rate for children ages 10 to 13. And that is just not okay, right? And, to say, okay, what in the world is impacting the younger generation so much more than the older generation? And the clear answer to me is screen use. To me, it's a clear answer to say, when we spend so much time on a screen on this, 2D object, instead of living in the 3D world with face-to-face communication, spending time with friends and family face-to-face, our mental health really takes a nosedive.
So those are alarming statistics when you talk about not even preteen, they're like preteens committing suicide. Could we get deeper into what those courses are? It's like the likes, bullying, what is happening in the screens that you think, are results of these statistics?
Well, I think part of it is comparison. Teenagers and we as adults can do this same thing. We look at someone else's profile and we see all of the wonderful parts of their lives, and we don't see any of the negative things in their lives. And so comparing ourselves to others is a big issue. Bullying is huge. And so that is occurring between young people. And here is another thing that has taken a steep rise, and that is sextortion. And some people out there do not know what that is. So I'll go ahead and tell you, as terrible as it is. And so, first of all, there was the trend among young people to be, sending nude pictures to each other. Okay. And that is just not okay to begin with. But now these adult predators have started to infiltrate that. And when they get a young person, they trick a young person, they have a profile that's of another young person, and they trick a young person into sending inappropriate photos. And then they basically blackmail them and say, if you don't send me $5,000, I'm going to share this photo to all your friends, all your family, everyone at school. And that has resulted in suicides as well among teenagers because of the fear of these pictures going public, basically. And so that is another thing that many people are not aware of. There was a survey published by Politico magazine in 2024, and it was a survey of 1,400 mental health professionals, and they asked them, what do you think is the cause of the steep rise in mental health issues among young people today? And the number one cause listed by far was social media. And so there you have, a survey of mental health professionals like myself who are on the front lines of seeing these young people who are struggling, and they clearly identify social media as the number one cause.
Because social media you could get so consumed into it. Like it's like a new reality, and it's picking up, right? Not only do we have AI, but we don't even know what the truth is in what's happening in our social media feeds. So it's so consuming. But you talk about the addictive symptoms that will consume anybody, even if our adults are doing this.
Right. The addictive properties can affect someone of any age, but younger people are more susceptible to becoming addicted because their dopamine can have higher spikes than our dopamine as adults. And so it has been shown in studies that social media use, and especially video game use, those activities get into the same pathways that drug use does. Alcohol, cocaine, heroin have, what they do in the brain, and social media and video games do the same thing. So I have a picture here, and I know some of your people will be listening and some will be on YouTube, but I'll try to describe it. This is a drawing of a cross section of a brain. And so you have the middle part of your brain here, which is called your limbic system.
Yeah.
This is where a lot of your emotions are housed. So anger, anxiety, fear, things like that. And then you have this front part of your brain, which is right behind your forehead, which is called your prefrontal cortex, right behind your forehead. This area of your brain is responsible for things like critical thinking, problem solving, communication, self-control. And so you want the different areas of your brain that have different functions to be connected to each other.
Right.
And so when we spend too much time on a screen and we have our limbic system activated, our brain is going to be putting energy into that system and not putting energy into connecting to the front part of our brain, which is, again, where we have self-control, decision-making, problem-solving abilities. And so that pathway that we have, that dopamine spike, is going to just put us in our limbic system. What happens is, and especially with video games as well, the person playing the video game feels very excited. They're happy. They're enjoying themselves, but their body is interpreting it as physical stress and danger. And so their body is actually in that fight or flight mode, which is very unhealthy. And so you have that adrenaline running, you have that dopamine running, and that can just cause a whole host of problems. But people need to realize that these screens have addictive properties. The CEOs of a lot of the social media and video game companies have come out and said that they had hired psychologists to teach them addictive properties that they then built into their programs, into their platforms. And so they have admitted, we made these platforms addictive on purpose. So we need to pay attention to that.
It's almost criminal.
Yeah.
It's almost criminal, isn't it?
Mm. I think they have some accountability there.
Yes.
So the more likes you have, or the more impressions you have, it becomes addicted to see it more and more and more and more. Or even just watching certain videos that make you laugh. I'm one that I love watching the reels to make me laugh. But you're saying that there are certain things that are attracting your emotions, are being so hyped that you want more of that.
Yes. The dopamine makes you feel good. It makes you feel happy and excited. And of course, we all want that. But we want activities that give us a healthy level of dopamine, right? And that way we don't get stuck in that cycle of, again, it's not, screens are not the real world. And they take us away from those real world relationships and real world ways of having healthy dopamine spikes and experiences.
And when you say the connection between the frontal lobe cortex and the limbic, what you're saying is that it keeps it separate and creates an illusion of real world. So it doesn't allow you to actually critically think and connect reality from illusion.
Right. And especially for the younger people, their brains are not developed yet. The human brain is not fully developed until age 26.
Yes.
So you take a preteen or teenager, and those connections between the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex, they're still forming. But if you are doing activities for, 5, 6, 7 hours a day that stick you in that limbic system, again, the brain is not going to be growing those connections. And so we are literally affecting the brain development of young people.
So besides the mental health concern and how it affects the brain, what are the challenges in connection and relationship?
Well, first of all, when parents try to limit screen time, if they do have a child or a teenager who just, gives this big screaming fit, that is a big sign that there's too much attachment between, the child and the device. It shouldn't be that much of a deal, but that meltdown shows too much attachment and some level of addiction. I think that, any screen time is obviously kind of falsely a very easy experience, whereas relating with humans can get messy, right? And so, especially
Yes.
young people, they're still learning, or they're supposed to be still learning communication skills, self-control skills, all of those things that we need for emotional intelligence and executive functioning skills that we need as teenagers and especially adults. But if we are spending too much time on a screen, we are not getting that face-to-face time with friends and family. And that's how we learn those skills. We have to remember that children are born without any of those skills, and they get taught, and they also just see it modeled by their parents. But if during dinner time, everyone's on their own screen, they're not seeing that modeling. They're not hearing their parents talk to each other or hearing parents, conversing with children. And that is how we learn. And so much of that is being skipped by too much screen time. And we're having this generation coming up who don't have the skills that they need.
Way back when, there was a time in which we called it the couch potato. Too much TV. Technology has advanced, and so has the need for more oversight. And that's exactly what you are explaining here. I just go back to when I was young, and back then it was called the couch potato. Now it's just too much social media.
And some of the key elements that you brought up is the brain is not fully developed in young people until 26, right? So we don't have structure or discipline around the use of technology. We are helping the child get addicted to the technology. So we're contributing to the technology by not giving clear boundaries on how to use technology. And I think some of our frustration, especially in the youth development world, is, well, the kids are always on their phone, but, we are struggling with addiction because they already are attached to this device, which we have allowed to be, everybody, a kid 10 years old is like, everybody else has a phone. Why don't I have a phone? But it is not saying it's not the phone. It's like, it's how you use the phone is what you're saying. How we use the technology is really what making it very dangerous for our young people.
Right. Video games and social media platforms have those addictive properties, and they allow young people to communicate with strangers, which is very, very dangerous. I like to make the comparison that parents obviously know that they would not let their child go spend the night at a stranger's house, right? That's just an automatic no, you don't do that. But what parents need to realize is that when your child or teenager has access to the internet in their bedroom, that is what I call a virtual sleepover, where you don't know who your teenager is talking to. You don't know what kind of situation they're in online. You don't know what kind of pressures they're facing. And so it's really not safe. You need to keep that in mind. It's a virtual sleepover with anyone in the world. And unfortunately, the predators out there are taking advantage of that. And they are very, very sneaky and just very, very damaging. And so many young people have, even if they haven't been targeted and abused, they have been exposed to, worldviews that are very different from however their parents are raising them. I think that, wonderful parents out there, they are wanting to pass down a set of values and morals in their family. And it's very easy for teenagers to be swept away into some other person's worldview, and parents have no idea that's going on. Family connection time, that's how values are passed down through sharing stories and sharing experiences is how we pass down morals and values to the next generation.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you're bringing up some real clear situations where technology is in the way of having discussions about morals and values. Unfortunately, some parents are using for younger kids like a babysitter. Well, if you have the tablet, you're entertained and I could do this. Or sit here and in front of the TV or in front of the tablet or the video game, and that way I could do what I need to get done. That is impacting the concept of having dialogue and conversations about morals and values. and things that are important. So it's not easy for a child to, not saying that it's not easy, but it will be an alert if we talk about how they could be convinced by a stranger certain things. If we don't have those conversations, we're not safeguarding our kids.
Right. I think about just the concept of you become like who you spend the most time with.
Yeah.
And so parents need to think about that.
I think when you said a sleepover, because if they have access to their technology overnight and we're not monitoring that, then they have access to anybody in the world, anybody.
That's right. That's right. It's really scary.
It's scary.
And that was a very scary, creepy thought when you described it like that. And if it did this to us, then maybe that this is the message that should be conveyed to parents everywhere. Think of it as a technology sleepover, internet sleepover. And I'm going to be so inclined to think that many would just give a second thought to that phrase.
Right, right. I think that's one simple but hard rule, I would say, is to say, no technology in the bedroom. Children and teenagers do not need to have it where they can just have total access without you knowing what's going on. And so I say, no screens in the bedroom can be an easy rule right there.
And the conversation piece is really where the criticalness comes from. We're moving away from having dialogue and conversation. And there's two things that come up for me with this is the lack of literacy, right? When we think about literacy also is dialogue, right?
Yes.
It's conversation. So we're having less conversation with our children.
Yes, that is very true, that young children, they need conversations. They need to hear conversations. They need to participate in conversations. And here's another way how screens affect that as well. So screen use, almost all of the time we are sitting down, using the screen, whether it's a phone, TV for video games, whatever. And so we are so much more sedentary, which we all need to move around, right? To be healthy, we need to walk and move our physical bodies. But for, again, young children whose brain is still developing, physical movement is necessary for the development of literacy skills as well. And so your physically moving your body is very important to your physical development, your academic development as well. And I think, that's another point that parents need to realize, that if you want your child to be able to learn to read and write, they need to move around, they need to run around, they need to be physically active and not just sitting. So that's, I guess, two ways how screens are really damaging literacy these days.
Yes. And also social development.
Yes.
Right? Because if you're not having conversations or interactions or building these deeper conversations about, my feelings, this is how I feel and this is, how I want to solve my own problems. We're not having those conversations. Socially, we're also becoming inept, right? We're like missing these social skills.
Right. And that is, definitely not good for that individual, but we need to also think as a society, we want people who can talk to each other, who can understand each other, who can respect each other and have civil conversations. That's necessary for a functioning society. And so again, it was kind of a realization for me when I began to think about, this is not just about me helping individual families. This is a society-wide issue. And going back to communication, I'm very afraid of what AI is going to do and how now young people are having conversations with AI chatbots. It's very dangerous. And here's what parents need to realize is that AI does not have a conscience, okay? And so if you are having a conversation with an AI chatbot, it does not have values and morals, okay? And so none of us really need to have conversations with AI. I think AI can have a place as a tool very carefully used by adults, but we should not be conversing with it, because a person who doesn't really have a conscience, they are diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, and they are very dangerous individuals that people need to stay away from. Unfortunately, those people need help from professionals and get professional treatment. But we need to realize that AI is a thing without a conscience. And so do not have conversations with AI. And that is on just, we're on the very tip of starting all of this AI and We need to spread that message.
Right, because it's designed for it to be fed, but there's no safeguard on how much your child is receiving from AI because it's also universal information. So a child is asking advice from AI. The advice that is AI is not going to say, "Oh, this is a 16-year-old asking me a question." They're going to answer this like if it's just a person from
Right.
information that's already out there in the universe.
Right.
And that's going to be another study for you.
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
that's going to be a whole nother line, a whole nother book or two. AI.
Your niche is actually a very new niche because of the fast growing technology. It's here. We saw it. Was it 2022 that AI hit with ChatGPT? I think it was either 21 or no, 2022. And look at where we are right now. It's still moving faster.
Right. We need to catch up. It's the technology moved too fast for us to realize the damages that it's doing to relationships. Unfortunately, suicides out there, but relationships and human development in general, it developed too fast for us to kind of warn ahead of time. So now we're kind of warning backwards, but saying, okay, for the future, here's how we need to interact with it. It is dangerous and needs to be treated as such. And so I, in my studies began to say, okay, here are all the damages that screens are causing. How do we heal the brain? How do we heal relationships? And so I began to look at healthy brain development and those components. And one is, having more face-to-face communication. That is how a healthy brain grows and or rewires. The good thing, we have been talking about, brain development for young people up to age 26, but now we know so much more about neuroplasticity, which is the knowledge that even adult grown brains can change. And so we can heal our brains from too much screen time. And so face-to-face communication and healthy attachments, those are two of the keys to healing the brain.
I really love that you are bringing this up. Me, an emotional intelligence expert, I'm constantly talking about the emotionally safe space. For any child, the emotionally safe space is about relationship with others. I need to feel emotionally safe. Your conversation here is saying technology is getting in the way of us even recognizing what that is. What does it mean to feel emotionally safe?
Right. We need to create that within families. And so it does start with parents, saying, hey, here's how we are going to interact with technology in our home. For, us as adults, here are the limits on ourselves, and here are the limits on our children. I say, social media just does not need to be a part of young people's lives. And I know it already is for so many, but just saying, hey, we need to sidestep that. I think part of the key here is to help younger people get excited about brain health, because I think, at least on some level, they want to be as sharp as they can be. They want to have the ability to do what they want to do in life. And that is going to require a mature, integrated brain that has all of those connections necessary. And so teaching young children about brain health and saying, okay, here are the things that help to create a healthy brain. And here are the things that damage the brain. And so in our family, we're going to do the things that help you to create a healthy brain so that you can be sharp and do what you want to do in life.
Yes.
And that sounds like a tool that can go into the toolbox.
Yes. Yes. We're identifying a time and a place on our regular daily life where we're actually sitting down and having conversations with each other. You spoke so eloquently about how important it is that that interface, face to face, is helping the development of not only the brain, but also literacy.
Right.
So that's at least one tool. What's another tool that you could share with us?
Another is spending time outside. Nature has, usually just a very calming atmosphere. And so that is going to counteract the fight or flight fear system that is created by video game use and social media use that gets us all, uptight like this, even though we feel excitement and we are enjoying that screen time, our bodies are in that tense fight or flight state. Yeah. And so being outside in nature, our bodies readjust to that calm, what's the parasympathetic nervous system to be activated to say, this is how we're supposed to be. For the majority of human history, we have spent the majority of our time outside. I think only in the past maybe 200 or so years have we spent more and more and more of our time inside. And I think we just need to, get outside and take a hike or play in the yard. And so, like you said, yes, we need face-to-face conversations, but even going for a hike together, playing outside together, games, all of those types of interactions as well in a calming environment is also very healthy to the brain for healing, growth and healing.
And connection. Right? Because if we're going outside together, we're playing or we're walking or we're enjoying, the weather, those are good ways for your energy to feel good. They're really feel good ways. So we need to alternate or look for ways that feeling good works for us, like physical activity, going outside, conversations. Oh, this is good. Give us some more.
Another one is definitely getting the adequate amount of sleep. And that definitely applies to us as adults as well, because we can get stuck on that screen and scrolling, and all of a sudden it's 2 a.m., right? And we ourselves get caught in that trap. But getting adequate sleep is going to help your next day tremendously. We all know when we have had a bad night's sleep, we're more likely to be grumpy the next day, even as adults. But children need that too. You need adequate sleep to be able to concentrate at school, to concentrate at work, to not be grumpy, right? And so sleep is when our body and when our brains store the information that we learned from the previous day. So if you're in school, you need that information to be put into your long-term memory storage, and that happens during sleep. So if you are pulling all-nighters trying to study, that's probably the opposite of what you need to do. Sleep is also when our whole body detoxifies. We have a lot of exposure to various types of toxins during the day, and sleep is when our body does a lot of that detoxing work. And so screens, not only just the times that we spend on it, we should not be looking at the screen the last thing before bed. So it cuts into the time of our sleep, but also cuts into the quality, because the blue light that emanates from screens, the blue light tells your brain that it's daytime. And so then your body is producing daytime hormones at 10 p.m., at midnight. And so then even when you close that device and go to sleep, your body has all of these quote unquote daytime energy hormones in it. And that's why you can't fall asleep. And so we need to be outside during the daytime. The sun provides the perfect rays of light that we need to tell us, hey, it's daytime, be awake. And then obviously at night outside, the lights go dim. And so we need to have that in our homes as well. But we're doing the opposite by looking at that blue light is telling your body it's daytime. And that's why we can't sleep. And so saying, we have to organize our lives around getting appropriate sleep is going to help everybody. It's going to help your brain and your body to be healthy.
So even having a practice that all technology is off at least an hour before bedtime will help.
That helps. I think that's a minimum. I think it's better to be even earlier than that before bed, but I think even an hour will help. I also think, for those who have to be on a screen later during the day, you can buy blue light reducing glasses or blue light blocking glasses, and those can make a big difference in your body, again, knowing that it's nighttime and I need to produce nighttime hormones. I need to start producing that melatonin that helps you to fall asleep, because, the blue light blocks the melatonin. Right. And so when you're away from screens, or if you have to use the blue light blocking glasses, that can help.
Oh, that's good. That's
good advice.
Yeah. Tell us about some resources that we could share with our families.
Well, I'll say a couple of things here. Number one, I just encourage parents to start talking to other parents and saying, hey, let's form a group here and support each other in setting these, screen time limits or not allowing our kids onto social media until they're older. And that support system is huge. And so even though you are going to someone who's like you, that is a huge piece of this as well, is to find other families who are on the same page. And I think it should hopefully be easy because so many parents are becoming aware of the problems, but then having a support group, an accountability group can really help. That's one of the keys. And then also, for people who have tried and failed or who want to do this the right way, I would, love to support them as a coach. And I can be what I would call like the bad guy, so to speak, and saying, okay, here, the coach is going to set our limits for us and teach us how to do this. And so it's not so much on the parents because I want the parents and the teenagers to have that good relationship. And so if I can sort of step in and be the bad guy for you to say, hey, here's what you need to do, that may help the parent and teenager relationship to stay more intact instead of having all of that fighting. And so my website is lifewalkcoaching.com. People can go there to learn more about me and what I can help people with.
That's awesome. And you're also in the process of writing a book. So
I
tell us about
am.
that because we would love to share this with our community when it gets launched.
Yes, I hope to have it published sometime early 2026. And so I will definitely be back in touch with you when it is released. And so my book, the first half of it is going to detail a lot of the problems, some of which we have talked about today. And then the last half is going to be details about the solutions that I have found for brain healing and relationship healing. And so it's about 50-50, whereas a lot of the other books out there are about 90% are about the problems and 10% is about the solution. And basically they say, oh, just don't spend so much time on a screen.
Yeah.
And so I want to go into here are the things that you do instead. And here are the things that help to heal the brain and heal the body and the relationships. And so that's what I put in my book, the solutions, the keys that I have found.
Great.
Well, you have left us with a wealth of information today and eye-opening insights that really has us think about, well, one, how does this affect the brain? And not only for children, but for adults, right? And if we are conditioning our kids to be addicted to technology, we're part of the problem.
Right.
I think we haven't been looking at it this way. We've been saying, oh, look at kids don't get off the phone. They don't get off the internet. They don't do this. But we have to set guardrails for our children, knowing that their mind is developing during this process and we are perpetuating this addiction.
Right. And if you think about it, with substance addictions, who fights an addiction alone? Right? They need a support group. They need a professional who, it's very few people who have a true addiction and just cold turkey quit on their own and it's fine, right? Again, you need that support. You need those lifestyle changes. People go to, a 30-day detox program, but then when they get home, they have to change their lifestyle. If they go back to the way they were, they fall right back into the addiction. And so a lot of this is about lifestyle change. And like you said, parents need to set up, okay, here's how we're going to interact with technology in our home. And you set those guardrails and those guidelines to protect your children from the addiction.
Awesome. And, there were some real key pieces that you mentioned that are beneficial for literacy development, physical development, sleep, cognitive development, emotional, social development. I mean, all of the developments that we need to understand that as our kids grow, it's going to impact their ability to be creators, to be innovators, to be social citizens in our society are impacted by technology.
Right. It is. And I think I just, again, want to spread the message and encourage parents out there to spread the message because I think we can make a difference. We start in our own homes and we spread from there to say we want individual families, and we want a culture that is healthy. And I think we can do it. I want to give people hope that we can do it.
You are doing such an amazing work in getting this out by having conversations on a podcast and spreading the word. But your research is important. So I want to congratulate you for taking on that risk, that courage that it takes to think out of the box. And we need more solutions out there than just problems. And you did say that as well. When it comes down to this world of technology, we need a balance.
Right, right. Technology is here to stay, and now we need to know how to interact with it in a healthy way.
I want to remind everyone to please subscribe, like, leave us a comment, talk to us about what your experience are around technology and connection with your young people. I'm really curious to hear what you have to say, what you took away from the talk with Mary Catherine today.
Mary Catherine, I want to thank you for coming here and sharing your insight and your expertise. Hopefully, you have shared enough information with us that we're going to be able to pass this on to our listeners as well.
Thank you for having me.